Well, good morning. It's a real pleasure, a delight to be here to contribute to this important conference. Benjamin Disraeli, a great Prime Minister, not a woman, by the way, said, "Nurture your minds with great thoughts. To believe in the heroic makes heroes." Guess he probably should have said heroes and heroines, shouldn't he? But how rarely in modern times do we turn our mind to greatness? How rarely have we lifted our sights to distant horizons, dared to dream of the heroic, to imagine a greater future which brings economic opportunity and fills lives with well-being? And how rarely we've tried to make that future happen. Over my lifetime, which as you can tell is not very long, but nonetheless, over my lifetime, democratic polities, not just ours, but all of them, have too rarely embarked on building the future which their country needs or their peoples want. You can explain that in a lot of ways. It's perhaps because of the 5-year electoral cycle, perhaps because it's the need to deal with the daily, weekly, monthly imperatives, perhaps a reluctance to bind the hands of their successors with long-term funding commitments, or perhaps it's just that the post-war political discourse has become too technocratic, mechanistic, just too arid. Well, not me and not now and not this government. Now we are realising the power to make a difference. We are thinking and planning and funding for the long term. Well, how, you might ask? Well, we've embarked on the greatest period of transport investment for well over a generation. We know that that will both fuel economic success and build that communal well-being that I described. Overall, transport infrastructure spending is rising by 50% this Parliament. We're investing £15 billion to maintain and improve our roads, resurfacing 80% of the existing network and building 1,300 new lane miles. We are delivering the most ambitious rail modernisation programme since the Victorian era, Crossrail, Thameslink, Intercity Express programmes. We're buying hundreds of new trains and thousands of new carriages. And then there's HS2, which we start building next year. In all, this rising tide of construction makes our nation one of the world's leading transport investors, boosting our economic prosperity. But that's not all. Creating tens of thousands of new jobs. This must be measured in terms of the opportunities it provides and the effect it has on well-being, as well as on its economic significance. Take HS2 for example. During peak construction, it's going to need 25,000 skilled people. Imagination, organisation, innovation needed to make this new railway age as great as the first. Meanwhile, the changes to our roads and existing railways require a further 10,000 skilled people. You know, that's going to require a re-evaluation of the practical. Because for too long, we've suffered from the idea that only through academic accomplishment do people gain a sense of worth and purpose. It's a fallacy of rationalism to believe that only academic study can have real value. For as John Ruskin wrote, the highest reward for a person's toil is not what they get for it, but what they become by it. The more pleasure we take in our work, manual or mental, in engineering's case both, the more of ourselves we invest in it and the more we get in return. We need to build a generation of curious, adaptable people to build all our futures. I began to think about the long term and the need for skills more than 10 years ago, as referred to in the introduction, as the Shadow Minister for Further Education, Skills and Lifelong Learning. I knew that we must elevate the practical by rejuvenating our apprenticeship programme, and you've been hearing about that in the last session. Challenging the misassumption that only academic accomplishment really matters. We're beginning to redefine the principle of higher learning. I had a look at the figures in preparation for today. You know, we have begun to make a big difference. In engineering, back in 2019, 43,000 apprenticeship starts, now 74,000. You know, in total, we built apprenticeships from 280,000 to 619,000. And you know the thing I'm proudest of all? When I became the minister, there was something like 2,000 or less, or fewer, I should say, to be grammatically correct, or fewer level 4 apprenticeships. That number's gone up tenfold to 20,000. That's about higher learning. It's about understanding that through the acquisition of technical and vocational and practical skills, people can not only achieve personal fulfillment, but can deliver what we need as a country to build that prosperity, to deliver that well-being. So we've made a progression a key element, because for too often, apprenticeships and skills generally were seen as a cul-de-sac, not that route to higher accomplishment, but a dead end. And progression through the programme is critical to encouraging people, inspiring people to study practical and vocational subjects. You know, we've made a big difference in respect of engineering apprenticeships. I think you know that. You know too that our great universities produce engineering graduates of the highest order every year. And you know, and perhaps this conference knows most, that too few, far, far too few, are women. For all this commitment that I made, and I believe we've begun to deliver on, I don't want to overstate our achievements. There's always more to do, isn't there, in government? For all that commitment, for all our work on skills, we know that all around us, in our families, in our schools, our workplaces, on our streets, walk hundreds of thousands of scientists, mathematicians, and engineers whose talents lie undiscovered, sometimes hidden even from themselves. They might be living happy, useful lives, but may never know the satisfaction of finding the occupation that truly fits their talents, that matches their aptitudes, their tastes. And as a nation, we will never know the scale of the price we pay for wasting such talent. It's the price paid in lost craft, in undeveloped skills. It matters for individuals because, as I say, their tastes and talents are frustrated, their dreams unfulfilled. But it matters for the country too, because it's the price paid in unbuilt bridges, missing motorways, run-down railway stations, unexcavated train tunnels. All the engineering projects we've accomplished, if only we'd had the skilled engineers, if only we'd inspired women to gain the skills to do the jobs that would have served the nation. So, you know, this conference knows, indeed it's sensed this conference purpose, to be frank about that and to set out what we're going to do about it. Now, there are those, the sceptics, the cynics, that say, well, governments say these things, they always have, this government, last government, previous governments. But if ever there was a time to take action to inspire women engineering, it is now. For the government to succeed in its investments in transport and elsewhere, it is vital that we do so. And it is our great chance. So when the sceptics say it can't be done, it won't be done, I say to them, there are remarkable things already being done, happening in this country today as we speak at this conference. On Monday, I met a group of apprentices, young men and young women, enthusiastic, proud, gaining confidence. They're working on the largest infrastructure project in Europe, the most technically challenging, the most ambitious. In little over 3 years, working through night and day, 26 miles of tunnels dug. And amongst the greatest achievement of this groundbreaking project, pause there for emphasis, groundbreaking, get it? Is the way it has welcomed women into the world of engineering and construction. If you're doubtful, let me just give you some of the facts. Of those who've undertaken work experience on the project, over a fifth are women. Of the project's last intake of apprentices, over a quarter were women. And the women make up a quarter of those taking part in the graduate programme too. And as you've probably already guessed, that's not enough alone. I want to use this dynamic, ambitious scheme ever embarked upon as a beginning, as a pointer to what more can be done. So let no sceptic say again, it can't be done, it won't be done. It is being done here and now in this city, or at least under it. The cross-sell line is now almost complete, on time and on budget. The task now is to hold the ground we've already won and to advance to new heights. So this year, we published the government's infrastructure skills strategy. It includes a pledge to increase the number of women working in infrastructure, and this is how we're doing it. Because we're paying, the great advantage is that we get to call the shots. For HS2, road investment, the upgrades to our existing network and railway stations, we're writing into the contracts with women hired for the work. In practice, it means that women should make up at least 20% of new entrants to engineering and technical apprenticeships in the transport sector. And the women working in the transport sector should increase to a number in line with the general population within the next 14 years. We also want to address the phenomenon that's seen 22,000 qualified women not return to engineering after a career maternity break, and I know that's something you'll be exploring during the course of your time together here. So, to deal with that, we're pressing organisations with over 250 employees to provide opportunities to those who wish to come back to work. And today, because this conference makes a difference, and I want you to know how much I believe in this, I'm going, as a result of your gathering, to ask the woman that I asked to run my National Careers Council when I was the Skills Minister, to work with your chair and my officials to support the ambitions I've set out here, and in particular to look at the advice and guidance and careers work we can do to make them happen. Because you know that actually these aptitudes, tastes and talents I referred to earlier, unless they're channeled into a conduit, which means that the people who feel these things, who have these dreams, can realise them, often they're frustrated. Those decisions are made very early indeed. So we're going to make a better connected, a more productive country. But more than that, we're going to measure what we do in the effect it has on our economic performance, on our communal well-being, and on the opportunities it provides for all our people, men and women. We have a chance with this investment, because these things don't happen every year or even every generation. You know, the scale of investment I've talked about is really quite a rare thing. Times of investment on this scale and pace are rare, and no one can say when days like these will come around again. So we must take our chances. The investment in our roads, our existing railways, and in HS2 means that we can make a real difference. So let's work together. Let's work together with this organisation and with the public sector and with the private sector to unleash the talents of tens of thousands of women, each with a chance of achieving greatness, each in their sphere to become heroic, a new generation in Disraeli's spirit, a new generation of heroines. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister.
Really great pleasure. Thank you so
Have you
much.
got time for one or two questions? Or
One or two questions would be fine.
that'd be fantastic. So, do we have any questions then? I think we've got a roving mic. Lady at the back with the red top. If you'd like to say your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Jill Collins from Sheffield Hallam University. Mainly, I wanted to thank you. I'm so pleased. I was putting a question together about how we would connect with the careers community, which is very disparate. You know, I was applauding the Hitachi presentation and the desire to connect with teachers and with careers advisors, but only too well aware that so many of us are self-employed. You know, there's just not an infrastructure there to support some of the work that needs to be done. So fantastic if we can bring back some of the practice that, you know, when I trained, I spent 3 weeks at B&Q as a careers advisor, helping them. So, and, you know, I wanted to stand up and clap. Thank you.
That's the kind of question that every politician wants, isn't it? Look, I know that this is not straightforward. So, you know, the trouble with politicians, I see my friend Meg, who's in the front row, is a great champion of these subjects, and we've talked about these things over the years, Meg, haven't we? There's a great myth, you know, that people on different sides of the political divide don't agree about most stuff. We do, don't we? She's nodding. Most of the time, she said. I know this is not easy, and as I said, it's easy for politicians to be quite blithe about some of these subjects, and I didn't want to do that, which is why I spoke in the way I did, because I could have given you a kind of off-the-shelf speech, couldn't I? And I wasn't going to do that. And it's particularly challenging in respect of advice and guidance and support of the kind you described. In what you said, and I think you made the point extremely well, if I might say so, is a disparate set of circumstances. So lots of skills, lots of parallel skills, overlapping, lots of levels of attainment required, lots of organisational complexity too. So as I mentioned in my speech, public and private sector needing to combine. These things, when they're across all of those parameters, are obviously difficult to coordinate. And I think we have genuinely made some progress. I mean, I tried to set it out. But the only way it will be achieved is by trying to pull together that variety of challenges around a shared agenda. And the best way of doing that is by us listening to you, which is what I tried to do when I was in the skills job, and what I've tried to do now I've arrived in transport with the responsibility of skills. I know, by the way, this is a view shared by Robert Halfon, the current skills minister. He's a great friend of mine. I spoke to his team this morning about this, and I know he knows what you said to be true too. So there is across government, I think, a recognition of some of the scale of the challenges, a realism about the fact this is a important hurdle for us to surmount, but a determination to get it right. Because if we don't unleash that untapped potential, we won't simply deprive tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people of their chance to be their best by doing their best. We'll rob our country of all that they can bring. So you can measure this in the emotional terms, which I make no apology for doing, by the way, of wanting to build lives that are big and fulfilled and satisfied. But you can measure it just in logistical terms, that statistically we've got to do this if we're going to get to the destination which we all seek. So thank you for your question, and sorry for such a long answer.
You've got time for one. Well, there's a lady over here. Good question.
I think this should be a much ruder and critical question, otherwise I'm going to kind of feel I haven't earned my money.
You've got an opening there.
It's an entirely selfish question. My name's Karen Barker. I'm starting a new UTC, University Technical College in Westminster, opening next year.
Would you mind if I come out? I'm horribly deaf, and I can probably come hear you better if I wander over to be closer to you.
That mic's on as well, if you want to start.
Would that work?
Yeah.
Well, I know, we're close enough to be able to talk here.
So I will be principal of a new UTC, University Technical College,
Yes.
opening in Westminster in September 2017.
Yeah.
Our specialism is going to be transport engineering.
Great.
And we are supported by Network Rail. What can you do? One of my passionate commitments is that we're going to have a science and technology school that's going to have girls, lots and lots of girls. How can you help me get lots and lots of girls into this new school?
See, I was told when I arrived, no Donald Trump-style answers, wasn't I? I was kind of instructed, and the trouble with that question is it could take me down all kinds of avenues I don't want to travel down. Okay, so now look, I know about UTCs really well. I worked with Ken Baker on them when I was at the Department for Education, and you'll know that Lord Baker was the great champion of UTCs. And we became close as a result of that. We had many meetings over it, and I tried to give them as much support as I could. I'm really excited what you said about transport. I mean, this is like manna from heaven for me, because it's so exciting to know that. I suggest this is what we do. I think, as a direct result of your question, if I might be so bold, I'm going to ask my officials to arrange a meeting with you. I have my team here to discuss the detail of what you said, because it seems to be so central to what I said. I think it's also about the link to other educational institutions locally. So often this is about the perverse incentives people have not to go down the right road, as it were, not necessarily to get the sort of learning that they need to meet their ambitions. So sometimes it's about coordinating that properly. This is something I faced a lot in the FE sector, where sometimes people didn't know what was available to them until it was too late, so they'd taken other avenues, as it were. So I think a lot of it will be about coordination of information, and I think we can help with that. And I'm, finally, more than happy when you get going to come and see you. Westminster's not too far away from me, so, you know, but I will certainly come. I mean, the other thing you can use me for is use me as your advocate. So I'm quite happy to come and speak to groups of young people and talk about, you know, how important these things are. I have two young sons. I have to a dreadful admission. I don't have a daughter. It's not my fault. It just worked out like that. So I have two young sons myself, 15 and 12. And I know of all the influences on them that will shape their thinking about what they can be. Now, mum and dad can do some of that, you know, but in the end, they'll be subject to the influence of peers, clearly of school, of teachers, of the media, including the social media. Not that I get involved in that, but you know what I mean. So if I can be your evangelist for technical and vocational learning, I will be.
Thank you.
A question from Nina, who's on the WISE board as well. I'll repeat the question if you can't. So.
Thank you, Minister, for those really encouraging words.
Yeah.
My other hat I wear is I'm the Chief Executive of the Renewable Energy Association, and actually renewable energy attracts more women to work in that sector than in the general energy sector. How can we ensure that we can enthuse girls and women to work in the low-carbon transport sector and solve our problems for the future because of all those amazing challenges that we're facing? I'd really appreciate your words.
Well, I was the energy minister You knew that. I'm not known to be a great champion of wind turbines. Did you know that too? Yeah, I knew you would. But having said that, I fully understand the importance of renewable technology. In our field, in the field I'm now in, of course, I'm working a lot on a series of measures which I'm responsible for in respect of low carbon and changing some of the assumptions about the access to energy and power and how that will affect the government's overall ambitions in terms of a low carbon future. I agree with you about the high-tech opportunities that exist. I'm really interested in biofuels, for example, and always have been, both as Energy Minister and previously. And I was able to visit a biofuel plant very recently, actually, to look at some of the issues faced there. I'm very interested in anaerobic digestion as well, which I'm really strongly supportive of.
I wonder how many girls know what anaerobic digestion is.
Have we got time for a short lecture? No, we haven't. Okay, right. You and I could come and do one up here with maps and things. I think there's so many aspects of that where we could do more work. I tell you what, let's think about that too, shall we? Because a lot of this is cross-departmental. The point about the skills agenda, and I've discussed this with Robert Halfon, is so much of it cuts across different aspects of government. You know, something I did as the Energy Minister, sorry, I could go on forever, I'm going to keep you forever, don't worry. When I was the Energy Minister, we were looking at nuclear skills. And I got the Energy Department to work with a series of other government departments to map the skills we need in that sector over time. And what I discovered was that unless you do that, very often these things aren't charted, actually. And when you're projecting forward 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, in case of nuclear, actually, it's longer, because if you think about a nuclear power station, you're talking perhaps 15 years, 20 years to get it built, a life of, 60, 70, 80 years, and then decommissioning of 20 years. You are literally talking 100 years. Now, mapping what the skills needs might be over that time is quite challenging, and it does require a lot of interdepartmental work. But you're right, making information available to young women about the sectoral opportunities is really critically important. Thus the work which your chair is going to do. It'll probably only take about, 3-4 days a week? We did actually have a word about it in advance. I told her it's not going to say that. But your chair's going to do, that I mentioned earlier, because I want to learn from you about this too. But I get the point. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for coming. Yeah.